Hey everybody, welcome to this January 21st edition of What the Football. Suzy and Amy with you, and we are thrilled to be joined by four-time Pro Bowler with 366 tackles to his name. Wait a minute. Nope. That's not, you're not Max Crosby.
I was working with him this weekend, but, there's lots going on in Vegas. So you got me instead.
Thrilled to have you.
You guys, sometimes you get so ready for these interviews, and I was so excited about this, being a Crosby fan, etc., and of course wanting to talk the Raiders with him, with you here, Amy. Last second, couldn't do it. Let me tell you what happens. I get very, very lucky because he has to go home with me. I'm like, can you stay and talk football with us? We are thrilled to have none other than Rich Eisen with us,
ladies and gentlemen,
today. Although it's like,
But I like Pete. I'm like I'm like the Regis Philbin of What the Football. Like every few weeks.
I can't weigh in on the Regis Philbin part, but I can tell you, I love when you join us. I love it.
Regis was a frequent guest of David Letterman and was always the guy whenever a guest kind of dropped out last minute, they would call Regis to have him on.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
True story.
That's the Regis Philbin of the David Letterman show.
And when Rich's show launched originally with our good friend Chris Long, who was a good friend of mine from Fox Sports, when he launched this as the DirecTV head honcho, he said to me, I want you to be the Joy Philbin to Rich.
That's right.
See, we bring this all full circle here to sit in, throw your husband under the bus periodically and do the show for him.
Yes.
He also was very sweet because he said, I also need a woman who can talk for 3 hours. And I was like, I can do that. That said, Regis, how are you today?
Well, I'm feeling okay, despite doing the Regis thing for the first time in my life on Monday night, which is root for Notre Dame football. That was Regis's bag. And
look,
and
Regis
just
aside,
I'm 0 for 1 rooting for Notre Dame.
Rich, you know that I only say what I mean, and I always mean what I say.
I hear that frequently on What the Football. Yes.
I love when you're our guest.
Thank you very much.
That said, you should have seen him last night watching the Notre Dame game, Ohio State. We had to turn it off and go to the Mandalorian at one point because I just thought you look so depressed.
Yeah, you're like, why were you like just watching this?
And we're going to learn a lot about what goes on in the Eisen house
the guys wanted me to Instagram live.
Yeah, how'd that work out for you?
Drinking, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't know. I draw the line at some. I told him it's not the Truman Show. Like, not everything I do needs to be recorded immediately.
Who were the guys that wanted you to
Brockman,
do this?
TJ, they're all like, you should go on Instagram Live, have some drink, get a little buzzed, and go.
Yeah, I'm going to advise you against that. I'm going to advise you against that.
As your lawyer,
let me advise you.
Say no.
As your lawyer, whose college nickname was One Beer, I advise you against that.
Your Amy Trask's college nickname in Cal was One Beer.
Mm-hmm. One beer.
Meaning what? You would only stick to one beer, or that would be enough?
That would be enough. Like one beer, I'm buzzed.
And you know what
I found out when I shared with Suzy on What the Football that my nickname was One Beer? One of the people that listens to us regularly, my nephew, he's married to my niece.
Yes.
And he immediately texted and said, my niece's college nickname was One Beer, too.
Look at that. It runs in the family.
Are we ready to talk about football?
Okay,
Mike,
this is
you guys
your
are
show.
So cute.
This
you
is
guys
your
are
show.
talking about college nicknames and
this
all
is
that.
Your show.
I'm so juiced up on information about Max Crosby that I feel like I have to, before I forget it all.
One martini Schuster.
That's right. Let me explain to you how this works, guys. So you shove all this information in your head because you're so psyched for who you're interviewing and you're ready and I'm like Rich is Mr. Laid Back. I'm as you can tell more aggro, so I'm like so psyched to talk about Max Crosby.
What does aggro mean?
I think it's like aggressive.
Oh,
is it?
Okay.
Is
okay. Yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
You're right.
I don't mean. I'm not going to push back because if you go aggro, that'll be a problem. So anyway, you're prepared for Max Crosby.
Weird interview.
The latest.
Amy asked us earlier like what we have in common, and I was like, dogs.
We have a lot in common.
I know we do. That's not what we're here to talk about.
We both miss Max Crosby right now.
Oh, man. All right.
Go for it. I'm a font of information and conversation.
What's going on?
Hit it, Suze.
I just want to give the people what they want, which is a really good, straightforward conversation about football that you can't find on any other show. That's What the Football right here on the Rich Eisen Podcast Network. Anyway, so
great reset.
Did you like that reset?
I did love it.
If I were Brian Gumbel, I'd have my glasses on and off. But all right, so news of the day.
Yes.
We're hearing that, possibly Max isn't coming on because we're hearing rumors about a possible head coach. And Amy, we spoke about this earlier. This is when the Jenga pieces all start coming together and falling apart.
Well, that's right. It's like, Jenga is a good analogy, I think, of musical chairs. And if you're a coaching candidate, if you want one of those jobs, it is a game of musical chairs because at some point, all the chairs will be filled and you may be the candidate who wants one of those chairs that doesn't get one.
Which is why, Belichick might have gone to North Carolina because he was reading some tea leaves. And, and the name that's being mentioned right now in many different places to be the Raiders' next head coach, Pete Carroll, is somebody that interviewed with the Raiders, and Ben Johnson immediately upon the Lions losing signs with the Chicago Bears. Gives you an idea of where he had an intention of going, and for various reasons, and that the pivot could be Pete, which would be wild.
And when you say various reasons, when Ben Johnson signed with the Bears, or when that was announced, someone immediately sent me a text. I've now deleted them from my phone because I was so annoyed. Caleb Williams or Aiden O'Connell?
That's by the way not inaccurate.
But I wasn't in the mood for that.
I don't blame you, but that's the point. Is that when you are a candidate for a head coach and you have the leverage to choose. And one of the things you need to think about is who's there at quarterback, and who's drafting high enough to get a quarterback if that's the job that you're taking, or which owner is going to be less mercurial, which front office staff is the most secure, which city would my family want to live in. I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it. And again, the Raiders clearly have, pluses. The minus is the fact is who's the quarterback and how would that potentially be used against me if it doesn't work out. And clearly it didn't work out for Antonio Pierce for various reasons. And the fact is that they didn't have a quarterback. And then the year before that, they bounced their head coach in the middle of the campaign because for various reasons, he didn't want to have Derek Carr anymore, which pissed off Davante Adams. And then he got hired because the previous guy, was no longer tenable to be in that position. And you're starting to churn through coaches. And so if you're going to go with Pete Carroll, obviously Pete's not going to have any wanderlust. This is going to be his last head coaching gig. Right. And Tom Brady must see something in Pete Carroll's abilities and sensibilities that he likes.
Well, he clearly has a lot of familiarity with him. Obviously, he's a 73-year-old coach who acts like he's 43. And I think in a lot of ways, he makes a lot of sense. He won a national championship with USC. He won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. He's one of only 3 guys who have accomplished that. Barry Switzer and Jimmy Johnson. He has a way of bringing an aura of discipline back that maybe wasn't there with the Raiders. And I will point out as well that he went into USC when Carson Palmer, a future Heisman winner, was a hot mess following the Paul Hackett administration there when he handed Carson Palmer the Jets offensive coordinator book, threw it at him. The kid had no idea what he was reading, and he lost. He had an absolute crisis of confidence, and Pete Carroll rebuilt this. Yes, I understand that you're dealing with a college program versus a professional football program, but I think that they need a sense of leadership there, and I think that Tom Brady obviously played against him in a Super Bowl, obviously has seen how Pete has brought some stability to a program and maybe needs to do a reset there in Las Vegas. And as we look at all these young coaches, it's kind of interesting to me, Amy, to see who are the candidates out there. And Pete obviously could be their dad in many of these circumstances, but maybe that's what the Raiders need.
Grandfather, too. But as you pointed out, I mean, seriously.
No, you're right.
And But as you pointed out, our buddy Hank Azaria, when he plays the character of Jim Brockmeyer, when he came on the show and sat here across the studio as Jim Brockmeyer, he called Pete Carroll the Dick Clark of coaching, because he's the world's oldest teenager, because he can relate, obviously. And it would be amazing that the quarterback of the team that prevented Pete from going back to back, we're talking about a three-peat opportunity this year, that prevented Pete Carroll from being mentioned as a dynastic head coach in the National Football League. And I also think of surefire Hall of Famer, which is what Pete, I think, would be considered right now if he was a coach of a back-to-back Seattle team, that Tom would be the one to hire him.
Life comes full circle.
It is pretty amazing. I don't know if that's going to happen. And as a matter of fact, that this conversation could be dated by the time, you're downloading this pod when we're talking about it. But, I had mentioned on the show today before recording this with you guys that I was always of the mindset of, if I was an owner in the NFL, I'd find that young, smart coach on the offensive side of the football in this quarterback-driven league and connect them at the hip of my freshly drafted quarterback and let them grow old together. And the reason why I would do that is also in part of the fact is you've hired that young, hot offensive coordinator candidate from another team, because they have a CEO head coach that now has to find a new coordinator for his team, and you're potentially going to throw your franchise into flux by having your success put into a guy that could leave for a head coaching job elsewhere because he's so great at the offensive coordinator position. I would never want to put myself in that position that Dan Campbell finds himself in, potentially by the end of the day, with both of his coordinators going somewhere else. And today I kind of pull back on that. And the reason why, and this may be part of the reason why Pete Carroll is in the mix here, Dan Quinn is killing it right now. He is absolutely killing it right now. Now they may miss Cliff Kingsbury by the end of the day, but he's crushing it right now. And Vrabel gets hired by the Patriots, a CEO head coach who's going to be bringing in a certain sensibility, and maybe Pete's that guy for the Raiders.
I have a few reactions to what you said.
Sure.
One, I don't think there should be interviews while the playoffs are still going on. And I don't think...
Well, what's the alternative to that?
Hear me out.
Because trust me, I'm with you. Pardon me. Like I said this to Mariucci when we were sitting there before game day morning the other day on Saturday. Joe Brady just finished an interview with somebody. I forget which team, the offensive coordinator of the Bills. And I'm like, wait a minute. He's coaching tomorrow.
Here's my point.
Sure.
When you are with a team, when you are an executive with a team, you want everyone in that organization, everyone focused on absolutely nothing but that upcoming game.
Yeah.
And if you've got your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator interviewing,
Agreed.
By definition, they're not giving every single second to your team. You have a chance in the playoffs. I want you focused on this team, not your next opportunity. And you asked, what do you do instead?
Yeah.
You push everything back. Push free agency back a few weeks. Push the draft back a few weeks. Push OTAs back a few weeks. You can do this if you're the NFL. But let me tell you something. If you're in the playoffs and you're an executive with your team, your mind is exploding if not everyone in that building is focused on the playoffs. My second reaction? Mm-hmm. I'm a contrarian, period. But I'm a contrarian on the issue that you need an offensive coach to help a quarterback. There's a lot of good defensive coaches who have helped quarterbacks. So I don't think you need an offensive coach to make
a defensive coach.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Bill Belichick was a defensive coach. They did just fine. And let me tell you guys one little inside behind the scenes point. When a coach turns down an interview request, I'm sorry, I stated that wrong. When a team denies another team the right to interview a coach, often it's the request of a coach. So there'll be times where a coach in your organization comes to you and says, could you turn this down for them?
Why?
Because they don't want to interview with that team, but they don't want to be the ones saying no. So the coach will say to the organization, to the CEO or to the GM, could you tell them no? Because I don't want to do it, but I don't want to be the one to tell them no. Because they don't want the reputation as a coach who's turning down interviews, but they don't want that interview. So they ask the team to turn it down for them.
Which made me wonder, is that what we're looking at with Mike Tomlin, or do you think he really wants to stay in Pittsburgh?
I think he really wants to stay in Pittsburgh.
But do you think he'd want to interview just for leverage? Do you think he'd want to?
He doesn't need leverage.
Rich, how many years can, and I know how much you love Mike Tomlin, and for great reason, but how many years can you take your team to the playoffs and not go further?
I understand that, but the fact that, he could take stock. Let's just say, obviously, Dallas is the team that would trade for him, or Tampa would take him back because that's where he's from. I'm just throwing names out here of some teams that might do such a thing, and Tomlin would consider it. The reason why he would consider it is twofold. One, it's a better situation than the one he's in, and two, he feels the situation that he's in is no longer tenable for whatever reason. I don't think the Steelers will ever give him the impression that his position is no longer tenable, so he needs to get out. We had Jerry Dulac, who's been covering the team forever and a day in Pittsburgh. He said Tomlin signed over the summer a 3-year contract extension for $50 million. That's a lot of money. So if the Roonies are giving him
what's 50 divided by 3?
$16.5 million.
Thank you.
And the reason why I had Chris Brockman did the math for me the other day. I'm terrible at that. So that's a lot of money. And so the Roonies have given him that chunk of change, and not just that loyalty if he might have to the organization. The organization has been having him for all this time, and I think he's one of those guys that doesn't want to say, I can't do it here anymore. I give up. You should come trade for me. And the question is would the situation, say, in Dallas, with a 32-year-old quarterback that's costing $60 million, one way to put it, when you're talking about Dak Prescott. You could also talk about a guy who's got a lot of years left in him and is a terrific person and a terrific competitor, along with CeeDee Lamb, who he's never had anybody like that. George Pickens, all due respect to him. I guess the last difference-making wide receiver he had was Antonio Brown, who is obviously comes with a warning label. So I don't know what his thought process would be. I don't think he has also a no trade clause in his contract because he knew this sort of stuff would be potentially possible.
Well, and he may just be invoking that which our parents taught us, or at least mine did. The grass is not always greener on the other side, and he may be cognizant of that.
No doubt.
What the hell's going to happen in Dallas? I mean, this is we are approaching hot mess territory really fast.
I loved it when I heard that Deion, he called him.
Yeah. I think that makes such perfect sense. We talked about this a couple podcasts ago about punctuating Jerry's career. I think it was right after the Landman appearance.
Right.
And we were just saying, that this is the perfect way for Jerry to bring all the attention to Dallas, to bring back one of his chosen people. He loves Deion. He loves the attention. He loves what it would mean. And who do we have that week on? Because it was, let me think about it.
Was it Stephen A?
Was it Stephen A? Because he said that Jerry would not want to share the spotlight with a coach like that. And I couldn't have disagreed more vehemently, because I think it makes perfect sense to bring in Deion Sanders, because you know that once Deion comes, others will follow. It seems to me like right now, no one is the Pied Piper of football more than Deion Sanders. Does that then open the doors for Michael to start coaching wide receivers? Will we see Sapp come with him? Will we see?
These are all the questions that would come with Deion. And, I from his reputation in this league, and in Jerry Jones, is he doesn't pay coaches.
Well, I have a question for both of you.
He doesn't pay coaches. And you know who's kind of like that too is our next door neighbor down the road with the Los Angeles Lakers, who is basically the Dallas Cowboys of the NBA. And the last coach that they paid was Phil.
Yep.
Interesting.
No doubt.
And they don't pay. I mean, Belichick
That's an interesting analogy.
At the end of his tenure, Belichick reportedly was making $20 to $25 million a year. And some of these coaches right now, Jerry isn't going to, and Deion would command a salary of a certain standard to leave Colorado and to leave what he is building there and to leave it just 2 years in and to leave the comfort of being a coach in the Big 12 where you have a path to the college football playoffs that I proffer to say, and this is not just me caping for the Big 10, a lot easier to make the college football playoffs in the Big 12 than the Big 10, a lot easier to make the college football playoffs in the Big 12 than the SEC, which is maybe why Belichick takes a job in North Carolina, because it's much easier to make the college football playoffs in the ACC. You in the ACC and Bill Belichick's on the sideline of a college football playoff lookout. For Deion to leave that, he would have to bring his staff. He would have to have the people that he wants to bring. Does Jerry want to cough up the coin for that? You'd have to really sit here and think about that because he doesn't do that normally.
I have a question for you both. Deion has stated he wants to coach his son or sons in the NFL. Well, Dallas already has a quarterback under contract.
Correct.
Is that going to impact a decision Deion makes, do you think?
I think Deion loves where he is. Again, I haven't spoken to him off camera, and I just, having known him, and I see what he has built, and I see what he posts, and I see how he goes about his business, and how he posted a video the other day of a member of the CU community telling him that his congratulations, your team has an average, a GPA
wasn't
average of 3.0
that wonderful?
or better.
Oh, that was phenomenal.
And because everything Deion does, people assume it's for show, but he really that really does mean a ton to him, and so he is building something there. For him to just tap out of it, to go to Dallas without the people that he would want to bring or whatever, I don't know. I think when Deion said the other day is that he wants to coach his sons, plural. Okay. To me, I'm I guess maybe more fluent in Deion than others, potentially, having worked with him for as much as I did. I took that to mean, hey, everybody, you're all talking about Shador, which is great. I got Shiloh coming out too. And this guy is draftable in the same way, and don't forget about Shiloh either. Deion knows the way this works, that if he goes to Dallas, Dak's making $60 million, that's going to be his quarterback, period. And plus, they're too far down the draft to go trade up to go get him, which is why everybody was mentioning Vegas for him, even though he and Antonio Pierce are represented by the same people. So I don't know what's real and what's not, because, again, I'm staying away from calling him and texting him or this sort of thing. It'll all come out in the wash. But as of this recording, the Cowboys are speaking to their offensive coordinator and Brian Schottenheimer, who checks a couple of boxes for the Cowboys. One, it's continuity, which is what Dak wanted with Mike McCarthy to stay. So Brian Schottenheimer can do this. Schottenheimer's been a coach in this league for a very long time, although he's never been an HC, so he doesn't check the HC box. We all know who his dad was and how he's been a football lifer. But he also checks the box of being less expensive.
Well, and there were so many reports out that he didn't want to agree to the terms and the years
McCarthy?
for all of McCarthy's staff, along with McCarthy, that Jerry was balking at that as well. And yes, he could pay the younger Schottenheimer less money and perhaps have that continuity. The only pushback I would say with Deion is, as you know, he has a 2-floor closet with a glass ceiling that he could match his shoes and ties with.
Do you know about this story?
No, I do not.
Suzy's referring to the story. Would you like me to tell here on
Yes,
What the
please.
Football? So years ago, Thursday night football game, I think it was the Thursday after Thanksgiving, Dallas rarely played Thursday night football because their Thursday game would always be Thanksgiving. So they came up with a construct of let's have Dallas and somebody else who plays on Thanksgiving play on the Thursday after Thanksgiving, so it's a full complement of rest and they don't have an extra short week. So that we were in Dallas and Deion had the crew over. And that's Deion it wasn't just the crew, it wasn't just the on-air people. It was everyone. It was like 30 of us because that's Deion. He opened up his home in Prosper, Texas, and his home had the the architectural similarity of the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. And inside is like a Dave & Buster's. He had a bowling alley. He had an arcade that opened into a full court basketball. It was wild.
Kind of impressed. You do Dave & Buster's.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're D&B people. Okay. Better than D&D people, Suzy.
He is. I would say he is.
Okay. Well, at any rate, the story is that Deion took us into his closet. You want to show us his closet? I swear to God. So we walk through the closet. We walk in, and what opens up is like a department store. I'm not kidding you. It's massive. It was a massive. It was maybe the size of a basketball court. And he walked us through the downstairs, which was the suits, and then at the end of the row, there was a spiral staircase leading to the second story where he kept the shoes. And the ceiling of the first floor, and thus the floor of the second floor, was plexiglass. So you could see through it. So Deion would walk to the shoes on the second floor, hold them up over the suit underneath, and see if it would properly match. And then, of course, the suit that we all knew from working with Deion, he would wear a suit once, and he said it would kill the suit for 2 years. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, he will not wear the same suit more than once in a span of 2 years on television. And once upon a time, he would, during a commercial break, reach into his pocket, remove from the pocket a dry cleaning receipt that was over 2 years old. I swear to God this happened. And we're walking out of the closet back to the dining area to meet everyone again, and Marshall Falk behind me mutters something under his breath. And I turn to him like, what'd you say? And he says, this is baseball money.
Yeah, that closet was real, and it was spectacular.
Yes, paid for by Marge Schott, I'm sure, for his
perfectly
time with the
stated
Reds.
by Marshall.
But as only he can.
Right.
But
right.
we point this out again because, Suzy points out how he just lives life bigger and fuller than most. And he's very giving and sharing with everyone as well. I mean, we could fill up the rest of this podcast with stories about, knowing Deion and how he's treated Suzy and I and our kids and our family and then all the people we've worked with. But the fact is that the number of times that we've had guests on our show, I know the guests you've had on your show, including Stephen A. being the most recent, trying to answer the question of why does Jerry Jones run his business the way that he runs it? And the answer that you hear so many times is he does really like the Cowboys being talked about as much as the Cowboys being talked about as winners. That just talk about it, spell my name right. Let's get this stuff out there that the Cowboys are the most important franchise in the NFL. It's very important for him, part and parcel. Obviously, winning matters to the man. We get it. That there's no other candidate that would put the Dallas Cowboys on the must-see map more than Deion Sanders coaching. And they play the Chiefs next year. They play at Denver next year. They play, name it, any of their division opponents next year. Name it. It would be a mosh pit brawl amongst television executives to get one of the 7 nationally televisable games for the Dallas Cowboys on their network. It would be off the charts, and nobody else that Jerry Jones hires can give them the opportunity to potentially win it all because they're a good coach and put them on the map in a way better positioned as a Dallas Cowboy. But there would be competing press conferences. Brian Schottenheimer, nobody's running off to Brian Schottenheimer's press conference. Hear what he has to say when Jerry's in the hallway holding court, right? So honestly, I just don't know if Brian Schottenheimer is being interviewed and is really being considered as a candidate, then I think Deion's already off the table.
Who else would be a good candidate, do you think?
For Dallas?
Yeah.
I know this is an answer that's a non-answer because he's off the table. I mean, they had Dan Quinn there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I know that's not helpful to mention somebody that they used to have there. They had Dan Quinn there. And before Dan Quinn is let out the door to go to the Washington Commanders, and if you have less confidence in your guy because you just got one and done by the Green Bay Packers, and you are just so beside yourself that you're going to tell everybody you're not getting contract extensions, and everybody in the locker room, you're going to have to play for your contract all the way up to the very end. And everybody in the front office, guess what? There's no money in the banana stand here. We're going to keep the people here. We're going all in with everybody. And Dan Quinn was available there at that moment, and you let him walk to the Commanders. And it's just a weird way for somebody who is in the Hall of Fame for great reason, and for somebody who's generationally enriched, multiple times over to run the business. It's just a big head scratcher.
Well, you guys are going to laugh at me for this because I'm going to bring up the New Orleans Saints and Dennis Allen. And here's why.
What's your favorite pinata?
Here's why. I am blanking on the name of the coach who was with New Orleans.
Sure.
And they passed over him to instead elevate Dennis. And the point being, whether it's Dallas or New Orleans, teams do that. They don't realize sometimes what they have in-house and let that person leave, and then they have to do something else.
He was a little-known coach named Dan Campbell.
That's exactly who it was. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
And
As
then yesterday,
always, you had my back.
Well, so does Don. And then yesterday, reading what Dennis Allen being rumored for Chicago, I thought, oh, Jesus, Amy's going to lose her mind.
I did see that little note, and I actually thought of you.
Being a DC, that's a different story, isn't it?
It is a different story.
She hates Dennis Allen.
It is a different story because you're not being looked to be the leader of an organization and the leader of a franchise.
Can I ask a question here, and not to take over your show?
And then I have a question for Suzy.
Okay. That when we're talking about interviewing coaches, you interviewed Bill Belichick for head coach.
I was with the Raiders almost 30 years.
Correct.
And only one time did Al involve me in a coaching search.
And it was
and
that time.
was that time. I spent several hours with Bill.
Where?
In our offices. And we called it the big conference room because it was big. And it was very clever of us, the big conference room.
Yes.
I met with him. I met with John Gruden, although I didn't meet with John alone. Bruce Allen was in my meeting with John Gruden.
That's odd.
Oh, boy.
Smash cut to decades later.
Oh, boy. Yeah, exactly. And I did meet with Bill. And then after I met with all the candidates, Al called me in his office and said, who would you hire? I was unequivocal, hire Bill. And I didn't think Al would ever share that with anyone. And he shared it as a press conference. He said, Amy told me to hire Bill, and she was right. And I was really touched that he did that.
Who did you guys hire instead?
John Gruden.
Right.
And Gruden was a good coach. I mean, he was a good coach.
Sure.
But I told him to hire Bill, and I thought...
Why?
First of all, Suzy, I'm going to go Boston on you. Wicked smart. Mm-hmm. He was... Did I do that right?
It was okay.
It was okay.
Wicked smart.
Yeah, okay, that.
Okay.
So smart, so
I know
knowledgeable.
you don't like me doing it either, but sorry. Okay, so he...
Just so smart. I was so impressed with his answers to every single question.
He was prepped. He was ready to go.
And it was more than prepped. I just enjoyed the discussion. It was good.
How long of an interview was it with Bill Belichick?
Hour, 2 hours.
Okay.
It's because Bill's entire life is football. I mean, that's his passion. It's his hobby. It's his occupation. I mean, that's what he does. Aside from, I think he's into some kind of like
I'm trying to
Civil
figure out.
War
So
history.
just so I understand again, this was late '90s, right?
I don't remember the year. It's whenever we hired Gruden.
So you hired Gruden in the late '90s.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
And I remember after that, Al would always say to me, "Kid, you know how to hire a coach, or you know how to pick a coach."
And so he was probably the DC of the Jets, Parcells' Jets or something like that.
So what you're thinking in your little twisted brain is that this could have circumvented all those wins with the Patriots? Is that what you're thinking?
No.
Oh, what's that expression? If a butterfly flaps its wings,
will there be a hurricane on the other side of the world or something like that?
No. The reason why I'm asking that, well, obviously the NFL, the history of the NFL would have been
entirely
radically altered. I mean, radically altered. I mean, we could sit here and play the if game coming off of all that, but no, I just think it's certainly in this time of year when it's about coaching and getting a sense and getting an idea. And do we go with the hot young candidate, or do we go with a head coaching candidate that had a job before and has now been a DC again? who do we go with here?
I know
And
you're
the-
thinking. You were
question for
thinking
you.
maybe, does this sound relevant to how we started the podcast?
Well, and that's where I was going to go with you. You shared with us the possibility of Pete Carroll to the Raiders. My question is, if for some reason that doesn't happen, would you think that Pete Carroll would be a match in Dallas?
I think Pete would be a match
I think
anywhere.
Pete is a
don't you
match.
think?
Yeah, I actually think that would make
Anywhere.
a lot of sense for an 82-year-old owner to bring in a very youthful 73-year-old head coach who he knows could provide some stability for a quarterback and a defense with Micah Parsons, et cetera, who needs to know that they've got a defensive-minded coach who's going to see Micah through, who's going to help build that defense more solidly, and perhaps be able to relate to Dak in a way that he feels comfortable, right his ship after these injuries and after this insecure season. I think it's a perfect fit if for any reason it were not to happen with the Raiders.
I think also to piggyback on that is we've had a handful of news and information guests on our show mention that the guy that Jerry Jones has his eye on, in particular, as a future head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, is Jason Witten, who's been coaching high school in the area, and I think is to a championship level, and how, Belichick would be a fit there because there's a shelf life, that he's not going to be there longer from, let's say, 3 to 5 years for somebody who's in their early 70s. You never know, obviously. And so Pete would kind of dovetail into that too, that, hey, Pete, you come here 3 to 5 years. Let's have Witten on your staff. Let's have Witten around. And he's the coach in waiting.
And it
you
makes
get
a lot
Jason
of
Witten in
sense.
there.
Sorry to interrupt, Rich.
No.
It makes a lot of sense because Pete does love to teach. I mean, that's exactly what he's been planning on doing, is doing a course at USC and planning to get more involved with the teaching ranks.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I think that would be actually a great way to set the table. But now we're actually going several teams down the list. I mean,
Never know.
As we sit here on Tuesday the 21st, recording this, wondering what the hell's happening in Las Vegas.
No idea. But that's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think's making the Super Bowl?
Oh, boy. Who do I think is making the Super
By the way,
Bowl?
this is championship week, for crying out loud.
Really? You don't say. Okay, let me think about that.
You got Felly over there laughing at that one, Abe.
What do you think?
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
What's that expression? If you come for the king, you best not miss.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So I like Kansas City's chances.
Again.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, look, if you come for the king, you best not miss. And I think they've got one of the best head coaches, maybe the best head coach in the league.
He just got his
and
300th
their
win.
defensive coordinator is just boom. And their quarterback, of course. So, and
You got to do it. I know you want to do it. Just say it.
well,
Just say it. Just say it. I know what you're thinking.
no, I think it's Philly, but just
You do.
well, and the only reason why is, and I know the statistics don't bear this out anymore, but I'm always the girl who drifts to home field advantage. And I just do think there is something to be said for home field advantage.
That kid's coming.
But
and
he is extraordinary.
That's
he
why
is,
I'm saying.
I would not be surprised by that at all. By the way, Philly fans, they booed my parents, actually. My mom and dad were in the stands.
Why would they boo the Trask family?
Well, my mom and
Because
dad
they're
were,
crazy. Remember the old jail under the link? I mean,
this was in the
they're
this was in
crazy
the old
fans.
this was in the old stadium.
Careful now.
My mom and
these
dad were
Eagles
in.
fans don't like being painted with a broad brush.
Well,
from
okay,
50
but they were
years
not,
of-
okay. So my mom and dad are at the game because they're on the East Coast. We're playing the Eagles, and they're up in the stands. And I went to see them at halftime, and they're getting booed. And I look around at the fans. I'm like, you guys, they're my mom and dad. They're in their 70s. What are you doing? And then the fans were really nice to them the
I'm
rest
sure
of the
they
game.
were.
They bought my dad a beer.
Hey.
They bought my mom snacks. They were very nice.
Oh, I once got in an argument with a guy at a ballpark, and then he and I ended up being best
I was
friends.
in
What was the
Fenway
argument
Park.
about?
Fenway
Fenway
Park
Park.
All-Star
Fenway
game.
Park, yeah.
All-Star game. Fenway Park.
Well, tell us what happened.
Oh, I don't remember anything. What did he do that pissed me off?
What
Something
ended
stupid.
up happening was we had seats down
Don't
the
make me
first
sound like a
baseline.
Karen because people I don't
You're
want to
not
hear like, oh, you're a Karen.
There's a first base line seats and in Fenway Park, and in order to see home plate, people were standing up.
That's right.
I think you were.
We were with little kids. I kept asking people to sit down,
and then this old. It was. I think it was the usher. Was it an
Stop
old?
me if you heard this before. It was a crotchety, angry old usher.
Yeah, and he started yelling at Suzy and whatever, and then you have a conversation with him, and then suddenly you were like best friends.
Yeah.
My dad used to do that at Raider games. My dad would sit in. My parents, from the day I joined the Raiders, bought season tickets, paid for them, and never, ever, ever missed one home game.
So now we've digressed. You think it's Eagles-Chiefs again, is what you're saying?
No, I could see it being Washington. I
Damn
don't
straight
have it.
you can.
I don't have it. Jayden Daniels is just spectacular.
Yeah, since neither of you asked me, I was going to say the Commanders, but like whatever. I'm just sitting over here.
I was literally about to ask you.
You were.
Yes.
Suzy, who?
Commanders.
I don't blame you.
I think they lose in the Super
you.
Bowl to the Chiefs, but I think the Commanders are going to take the game this weekend. And I love Saquon Barkley. I love him so much. He's my favorite player to watch right now.
Really?
Oh, I love watching him.
Really?
He runs like a very angry man, and I just think
look
he's
at that
awesome.
shot right there of him beating the Rams with a 70-something yarder.
Look, I think Jayden is just, as I said, spectacular, and that team is very good. But I do put a lot of weight on home field advantage.
Let me tell you something. I'm in on the Jayden Daniels train. I'm in. I'm like all in now. I've never seen anything like it. And again, the first year we were on NFL Network, first full year that we were on NFL Network was 2004. And I interviewed Big Ben as a pre-drafted rookie. And then I interviewed him as a member of the Steelers for the first time. And then I watched him get on the field in like week 3 when they moved away from Tommy Maddox.
Oh my gosh.
And then he didn't lose until the AFC Championship game. Didn't lose until Brady beat him, just like everybody else. And then Brady,
thanks for the memory.
Right, and then Brady wound up going back to back. And the reason why I bring all this up is even when Ben was doing that, and Roethlisberger is viewed as the greatest rookie quarterback ever because of the way he was born into the league and the way that he made it all the way to the AFC Championship game before losing, that I remember it was always game manage it, Ben, because he had an incredible ability that is going to put him in the Hall of Fame. Of the play with Ben Roethlisberger never began at snap. It began when he left the pocket. He would extend a play in such a way that he kind of like was a little bit of Josh Allen before Josh Allen, right? And so, because with his size and his ability to throw and run, it was a big threat. The reason why I bring this up is you take a look at all the rookies who have played in conference championship games before, from Purdy to Mark Sanchez to Flacco, as when he was a rookie, to Ben Roethlisberger. Sean King was the other one. All of them were game manage, please. Do not screw it up. Ben, don't screw. Cowher would be like, let's put LeBeau's defense out there rather than you make a risky play by trying to extend the play. Hands on 10 and 2, please. Jayden Daniels is the exact opposite. They're like, go for it, kid. And as a matter of fact, not only go for it because you've got the ability to do it, B, we trust you to do it because you make the right decisions every friggin' time. And then on top of it, they put him in the most high leverage situations. 4th down inside the 5, 3rd quarter. Go for it. 4th down here, 2nd quarter. Go for it.
He's playing with house money, right?
I've never seen, and that's the other thing too. They are playing with house money. They got Why Not Us going for them. They are a dangerous team with the greatest rookie quarterback I've ever seen.
Well, and I will say this about Jayden. I shared this on CBS Sports Network last Sunday. Put his statistics aside, put his talents aside for a moment. I just look at him and I see something extraordinarily special. And the analogy that I shared was this. I flew in a fighter jet. I didn't fly it. I was the passenger. We were going 500 miles an hour. And when I look at Jayden Daniels, I think if I'm ever in a fighter jet again, going 500 miles an hour again, and there's a problem with that plane, I want him in the cockpit.
He's as calm as ever.
He's going to figure out a way to fix it.
I was saying to Suzy the other day watching against the Lions, I'm like, he's like Roger Federer. You know, he doesn't sweat. He makes an incredible play. out of nowhere, and you look at him and you're just like, oh.
Yeah, totally.
You want him piloting your
He
plane.
plays with a
It's
joy
not
that we haven't seen in a long time, guys, and I think
It's
it's
real.
just thrilling to watch.
Can you imagine him in the Super Bowl? By the way, if he does, just to wrap it, I know we're going on, but he'd be in the Superdome. He went to college at LSU.
Wow.
Right. And for him to, you understand what the Commanders franchise was.
I did.
You were in the meeting room with that man.
I was.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sure you could fill in a whole WTF with a lot of the F's.
Oh.
Okay. And so, yes, right. So unbelievable what we're seeing right now. Unreal. And it's real. They could win the whole friggin' shooting match, and it would be a story for the
All right,
ages.
you've convinced me. And by the way, one quick note about the gentleman to whom you just referred. His first meeting ever, the first league meeting Dan Snyder ever attended after purchasing the team, one of his entourage walks up to me and says, "Please don't look Mr. Snyder in the eyes."
Get out of here.
I'm
That's
dead
so
serious.
gross.
So you know what I did the rest of the meeting? Just stared him dead in the eyeballs. Just stared at him dead in the eyeballs.
Who would say such a thing?
His entourage.
Crazy
To
people.
you? Don't look at him
please
directly?
Please don't look at Mr. Snyder in the eyes. Please
Why
don't.
would that be?
I don't know, but
You should have said, like, hey, Dan, how are you?
I know. I stared him down. The
Hi,
rest.
Dan.
And by the way, one reference to your earlier point about the Cowboys
That's
and
an
Thanksgiving.
insane story, by
it's
the way.
dead serious. I just stared him down the rest of the meeting. You mentioned the Cowboys hosting the Thanksgiving game. There was a league owners meeting at which one of the owners, and I don't remember which one, proposed rotating Thanksgiving games so other teams could have home games. Oh, you should have seen Jerry's reaction and Detroit's reaction. That wasn't happening.
I bet you it was Bornstein.
It might have been. It might have been.
Because Steve was, and it wasn't anything against Dallas.
No, it wasn't. It was just
against,
rotated.
No, it was against Detroit.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, everyone, they were sick and tired of Detroit Lions getting their asses beat.
Okay, I didn't know that's why it was
in front
suggested.
of beachfront property. So you know what the compromise was? Is
Adding the third game.
That's right. And guess who was the one to first do that? NFL Network.
Yep.
So as
But you
always,
should
Steve
have seen-
Bornstein got his way. He got
And
another
Steve
game.
Bornstein
And got his
always
way.
gets his way.
Damn
And
straight.
boy, oh boy, you should have seen Jerry's reaction. He stood up from his chair. The Cowboys always sat at the middle table. We
Yeah.
were on the left table.
Yes.
And he stood up, and you're just like, oh, okay, here it comes. And when you wanted to talk at a league meeting, you walked up to the microphone, and Jerry just strode over there and gave us a few thoughts on that.
Like Landman.
Just like Landman. All right, Rich, you're not Max Crosby, but you're a great guest.
Thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate that.
And unlike Max Crosby, I live with you, so it makes it a lot more convenient to say,
We're getting
see you
into
at
some
home later.
interesting
See you
stuff
later.
now.
All right. Fun show, ladies.
Hey, guys, thanks again for taking in this edition of What the Football. We will see you again next Tuesday.